welcome back to another episode of Chrysalis Satori. Today we are going to talk about the All American burnout and why travel helps with that. So,
Or at least for us.
at least for us, yeah. Now, full disclaimer: we are not we're not professionals. We are not psychologists. We are not
Just sharing life
psychiatrists.
stories, that's all.
We are just sharing our stories, and Wes and I tended to help each other with sharing these stories, and it identified.
Anecdotes.
Yeah, we talked about these things like, oh, you too, and so we were kind of like we bonded over these things, and so we just decided to make a channel to bring it to you. So today we're going to talk about why. After the last episode, we talked about what burnout is, and today we're going to talk
Or was
about
for us. Yeah.
yeah, we're going to talk about why getting out of the rat maze helps with that. So with that, buddy, I'm going to bring up a text wall for us. There we go. And the first thing on the list is fear of change. So
Well, I think that's more the subject matter for all of this.
it kind of really
It's
is.
less of a talking point, and more the overall subject that all this bleeds into. So,
It truly is. So once we got out of the country, we both ended up in Europe, where we met here. Um, we while we talk about these things, like we're trying to figure out like that black cloud we talked about in the last episode, the black
hypervigilance. Yeah.
hypervigilance and the black cloud over your head, why that dissipated once we got out of the rat maze. So it's very difficult to see the rat maze when you're in the rat maze. So once you get out and you experience other cultures and you experience other people, completely different lifestyles, completely, you sacrifice some things, you gain other things as far as moving to a different country. Why that helps. And one of the things you said, I think this is after you read the book called The Infinite Game. Having a finite goal in an infinite game is unattainable. And I thought that was very insightful. You want to
Uh,
expound on that a little bit?
Well, how do you? I mean, everything that in our culture is about winning, finishing, succeeding. All these things have an end. Life doesn't have an end. Growth doesn't have an end. Everything that is orchestrated around us, everything that we're taught and live within, is finite minded. And so, of course, this influences us, right? This teaches us. This is how we're centered, unless you've had an opportunity to be exposed to a different way of life, and most of us haven't. This was our opportunity to do it by getting out into other worlds and living a little bit differently. So, yeah, you can't see, even if you know you're in the rat maze, you can't see it for the walls because you're in it. You have to get out of it. You can't even invoke change of a system if you're within the system. You can't see the Matrix if you're in it,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're Neo, I guess. You, you can't
That was his power. He could see the matrix. So yeah.
right while in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's one understanding what these things are and also overcoming this. So hence the fear of change subject matter. So even if you are aware of some of these things, because maybe you have done enough travel, even if it's just vacationing or some long stays somewhere else, enough to become aware, even if you can't clearly define what it is, you have this different sense of being and lifestyle and how you're oriented while being somewhere else. Even if you do become aware of the fixed system that you're in and the finite mindedness of everything that you're in, at least within America, uh, even if you do understand it and you do become aware, and we'll talk more about getting to that, but getting those understandings, and that's what travel helped, certainly assisted with these understandings. You know, so even if you're aware, why can't you make the change, right? Rather than coping, which is so much that's the American way, it's just coping. Medications, cannabis, alcohol, yoga, the gym,
Mm-hmm.
therapy, but are these being used to stay in the game, which they were for me, and I think most people are. It's just to stay in the game, so it's a coping mechanism rather than a tool for change. Do you ever actually invoke the life changes required to live differently, or are you just doing it to stay in the game longer, which is what I did, and that's why my burnout came to my door and kicked the front door in hard.
Yeah.
Because I just you stayed in too long. That was something in the previous episode I talked about. I was even having, I was hearing voices in my head, my own voices. I wasn't hearing some other thing, but it was so much I couldn't even quiet them. That was part of the insomnia. That's where, we should reference, uh, where is her material? There's a TED talk about that. Oh, I shared that. That's in the WhatsApp. 1 second. Sorry, it's a little sloppy, but
No worries.
um, it helped me a lot because it took away seeing this, hearing this woman and what she talked about. It helped me a lot with it. So it's a TED talk. We can put the reference to it on YouTube in the descriptions.
Hmm.
Um, Eleanor, and I can't see it because it's not big enough. So again, sorry.
We're not a professional outfit here.
Let's see. Eleanor Logden. She does a speech on list on your inner speak. And I was trying to remove these voices. I was trying to get them to go away. I was trying to use things to make them go away. And what she talks about is, uh, in fact, listening to them. They're there for a reason. Listen to them. What are they saying? Why are they saying it? It may not be clear either, but what is the things that are in common that keep coming up? Even if those words are not being spoken, what is the subject matter around? Listen to the voices. It's your defense mechanism telling you that somehow you're in the wrong place or in the wrong way in your life currently.
Hmm.
So it's a great video. It took the shame and the fear out of like, hey, am I going crazy? Not wanting to talk about it. And listening made all the difference. Listening to them, I made other changes that I was still living with some bad decisions. Even after my burnout, I was in a relationship too long with the wrong person for the wrong reasons. And those were some of those voices. So listen to the voice, listen to what your body's trying to tell you.
Yeah.
Um,
That
so,
kind of goes rolls right into the next point. You can't grow in a suit of armor. So it's
and I think I got from that, I believe, from Carol Dweck's The Mindset.
yeah.
The pseudo armor is the metaphor for the ego, which in the previous episode I was saying it wasn't the real me. It was it was a coping mechanism version of me to succeed in the world that we were born into. That's how I got there anyway. Uh, it will protect you. The ego, that's what it does. It protects you. Nearly
Hmm.
everything is a trauma based response, and then something that'll protect you and maybe even help you succeed. Um, you'll keep that. But the thing is with that force field, that suit of armor,
Hmm.
that ego, you can't grow inside of it. It will defend you, but you can't continue to grow. You can't continue to develop.
Yeah, and I think that suit of armor could be metaphorically anything. Um, you're talking about some of the chemicals people ingest to cope with those things. That becomes your suit of armor. Um, whether cannabis or Adderall or whatever, Lexapro,
Your
um,
habits become your identity.
they become your identity, and it becomes a shell around you that you can't grow out of, and you identify with it. It becomes part of your personality. It becomes part of your who you are, who you present yourself as to other people. So it's definitely something that you have to learn to shed in order to grow. Excuse me. And that the next point, the change is presented to people like like life or death. Uh, it's a death instead of a positive change. So any kind of change becomes like a negative thing, and I think that's uniquely U.S., a uniquely American thing.
Oh, well, we reinforce it. Our culture
Very much.
reinforces some of this, but no, that's being human. As a survival mechanism, all change, whether good, bad, any change is initially and immediately seen as a threat. It's treated fear based, it's fight
Hmm.
or flight. This, I think, you can get that in multiple readings. I think that's even in the Neuroscience for Dummies book, but that's certainly in Dr. Joe Dispenza's work.
Hmm.
Any and all changes immediately, and these things happen at a chemical cursor level within the body before you're even conscious of it, before you even begin evaluating or aware that you're feeling these things. The changes have already taken place.
Yeah.
This is every human being. This is how we're wired. It has helped us to survive this long, but now we live in a different era where rate and change is not necessarily negative, but it is a lot of it. And so this is why we perceive and receive so much of it. as negativity, a burden, fear. But I think more to your point, we were saying uniquely American is for some reason in our culture, we have a strong need to identify people very flatly,
Mm-hmm.
very linear.
In a
Um,
box, as they would often say. Like,
you're a type,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I feel comfortable if I can label you and identify you this type because then I know what I'm working with. Again, just human generalizations that we use for compartmentalizing, categorizing information. So again, not if I can't understand you, I fear you, right? So
Mm-hmm.
again, another human just genetic wiring. What is that dune? To understand a thing is to control a thing.
Yeah.
Um, so once you understand something, you're no longer afraid of it. So it's a need. There's a definitely a human, just innate need to understand things. Otherwise, you're afraid of them. But it's just our way of going about it is very flat. It's very matte. It's very opaque. It's very linear. It doesn't allow for a lot of variations. And it's funny. All we ever talk about and uh, put out there is to be yourself and be this and be unique and be that, but nothing in our system actually allows it. We sell that.
Or promotes it. Yeah.
We sell that, but at that we do not. We don't respect it. We don't allow it to develop very well at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that sense, once you're identified or have your identity, you kind of cling to that, and also obviously if you're getting positive responses from what you're presenting yourself to be, you're going to stick with that. Again, that look, that routine, those actions, the way you're speaking, what you're wearing, how you hold yourself, what you do.
Mm-hmm.
If that's getting that's going to become your identity because your body, again, at a chemical level, is going to reward that. Because this is safety, this is good, right? I'm rewarded. This is not fear. I'm getting positive feedback.
Yeah.
So these things can become you even when they're not you, unfortunately,
I've
and they take
contended with
over.
that my entire life. Like I think nobody could really put me in a box ever because I could do different things. I was the jock. Playing football, and I was in
Yeah,
drama club. I was playing music. I was a straight A student. At a very high grade point average, and like so, nobody knew where to categorize me. So my tendency was, since they couldn't categorize me, they would judge me or say, "Oh, you're lying about this or this, whatever." They didn't believe certain things,
or they don't trust you. It's like I
right?
don't trust you.
So I ended up
Mm.
like holding back, like pushing things back inside of me, so that I wouldn't tell them everything about me. And it was actually something that even when I first met Wes, I ended up being way different than his initial reaction to me was. So, but that was
You were a different version of yourself in a different scene.
the
I like the real you.
it's a product of that master of all trades, or jack of all trades, master of none, but better than a
You're a bit
master
of
of
a
all classes.
Renaissance man, and I like that. But yeah, again, American culture does not actually reward
It
being dynamic. We
it
say do it,
it
we
doesn't.
tell you to do it, but we do not
No.
reward you for doing it.
In fact, they judge you and they kind of fear you a little bit, and
We shun you.
yeah, and the tendency is to want to step on you. So it's definitely something that's if you can't put anything in a box, it's a tendency of humans to if you can't measure it, put it in a box and say, oh, okay, this is this, like an identity politics kind of thing. Uh, they don't understand it or they don't embrace it. So it was something I had to really adjust and contend with my entire life. It was very strange. Um, I guess the last line of that line is giving up everything is scary. But I think it's a fear of judgment more than anything else.
Well, this might apply everywhere else in the world too, and I just haven't experienced it. But certainly in American culture, we treat life changes. So life change being something big, a career, uh, kids, not kids, just moving, relocating. It's
Hmm.
hilarious when I was moving out of California. The repeated, really? Where would you go? It was kind of funny. Of course, then there was the mass exodus the following years, and everyone was in California after I did that. But yeah, we treat change very harshly. Again, it's like it's for some reason when we speak about it, when it's spoken to, shared, and spoken back to you from someone else, it's usually out of a place of fear. You listen to the tone, you listen to the words used. I can't tell you the number of times, and it's positive. It's nice that I heard all this. I had a lot of people that were proponents. Everyone, when I was leaving America initially after resigning, they I heard the words a lot. You're so brave, and I'm like, I thank you, but I don't feel that way at all.
I heard that
I don't
often.
I, I don't think that at all. And I'm like, I would be honest. I'm telling you, most of this happened to me. This just happened to me.
Hmm.
The burnout happened. This is what I need to do, or I feel like I need to do. It's not like I have a guide or anything, but all of this has just happened to me, one thing after another. So I can't take credit and say I was brave. I didn't feel like that at all. I didn't see these things in the same magnitude that they did. I wasn't afraid. So what we were talking about in that bullet point or in that line that we've got there, really what that comes down to is when you realize like the burnout, if you identify some of these stages are coming on or the voices in your head and that sort of thing, you've got to have the ability to invoke the change, to make the change in your life. So that could be changing your career, changing your job. And for whatever reason, this is where I think you were saying, I think this is maybe not just American, but certainly first world, probably all first
Hmm.
world. Changing a career for some reason is just treated like death, like starting over. It's so big, it's so scary. You would never do that. And why would you? That's why you continue to utilize every coping mechanism you can to stay where you are.
Hmm.
It's just seen as such a huge fear-based thing, and I can tell you not just my own story, but so many other colleagues that did take the early retirement program. They didn't retire. They took a few years off or something, and they wanted to get back out there and do things. Life's,
Yeah.
there's a lot of life to live, and you can't just sit around. I've discovered that. There's no happiness in that. It's nice for a break or a change. Maybe that's what you need from the trauma, but
Yeah.
it does not bring you to happiness. So they went back out and and started over, and some of them started over and started over because again corporate life has changed and continues to change, and it's not what it used to be, and it never will be again. And so it's hard to find the right spot again.
Hmm.
But they treated with just such absolute, you would just stay in hell rather than start over, and that's
That's a
probably
big, and it's self-reinforcing. It's amazing how you could force your mind to embrace that don't change. Yet the world is changing around you like crazy, and you're kind of fighting it, and I don't know. It's I think it's ostracization. Like I think your family, your friends will judge. I had so many people reach out to me when I moved out of the U.S. They were saying, "Oh my God, I could never do what you did. I could never do you." I mean, the brave thing came up a few times. Oh, you're so brave. It's like it's not really brave when I'm.
I didn't feel like that at all.
Yeah, I didn't feel like it was brave, but they're like, well, I couldn't do it. I definitely couldn't do it. And I'm like, well, why couldn't you do it? Oh, because of this, because of this, because of this. My job, mostly, things like that. But those are all things that are locking you into something that you may or may not want to be. And overcoming that's very difficult. You're going to get a lot of pushback. It's kind of like crabs in a barrel. When one crab reaches the top of the barrel, the other ones pull him back down because they think he's getting out, and they want to grab onto something that's above them, and they grab it, they pull it back, they end up pulling him down. So it's definitely a maybe it's a Western world thing. I'm not really sure where it comes from, but once I got out, it was very and I mean, I don't know. I felt like a different person. I truly did. I was like, man, this is like that sigh of relief was just one of the best feelings I've ever had in my life. It's like
Well, this
truly.
is just more of the elements that breed apathy. I think these are characteristics of first world life and worlds that are based on progression,
Hmm.
not on life goals, not on living your life, but just progression, which is constant change and adaptation, which by itself is not necessarily a bad thing, but we're not taught that. We're not taught that that's what
Hmm.
life's going to be. We're not taught how to work with that. Instead, we're taught to look for stability in the form of something very linear,
Like
including your job and your
literally
career.
two completely, opposing forces, two
different
diametric
ideologies,
that are working at the same time of your life. I find that ironic. Like, the world's constantly changing. You're because the company's constantly changing. Yet you are forced. Your natural instinct is to stay the same, stay the same, stay the same. And
and you're judged to at least previous generations, and I think the mechanisms in the market still, I mean, they require that. They want
mm-hmm,
absolute stability and as little change as possible from you as a consumer, from for your credit, for
mm-hmm.
everything that you're metricized on. They want that consistency, but that's not the life that you live in. So yeah, it's a contradiction of demands both within the same system.
Do you think that lends to burnout too, or
Absolutely. I mean, so that's what I think some of the what we want to talk about is trying to identify. You got to realize you're in a system, so know thy enemy. Or that's a bad way to put it. It's a negative way to put it, but know the system you're in. The first thing is you've got to understand the characteristics of the system that you're within and the influences that that puts on you and why you might be living a certain way if it doesn't feel right. And understanding the differences of the things you can control, you can't control. You get into compromises and whatnot, and that's part of life. But understanding, seeing, accepting that. So seeing the matrix, seeing the rat maze, rather than staying on the hamster wheel and just continuing to upgrade the hamster wheel to feel better as a coping mechanism, right? Well, it was a
mm-hmm.
tin hamster wheel, now it's a steel one, now it's a powder coated, now
Yeah,
it's silver. Now it's a gold. Now it's a platinum. I'm going to get a diamond crusted water bottle now. So, it makes you comfortable and you can stay in it that much longer.
it's still a hamster wheel. Yeah,
But that's not change or growth. You're still within the same cage, right?
that actually kind of
And
goes directly into the next point. I'm sorry if
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, so the metaphor for the diamond hamster wheel is wealth. So, what is wealth in the U.S. versus wealth, community and relationships and experience? So, the U.S. defines it to me heavily as materialist wealth, whereas wealth here is not, or wealth in Europe or what other countries or other cultures isn't necessarily just having a diamond encrusted hamster wheel. What does that mean to you?
Well, again, it's like identifying what you are in the system you're in. So I would say for America, and this is my opinion, the metaphor of the Matrix. He holds up the battery. For me, in that scene, rather than saying the battery, a power source, it's the equivalent. You are a tax generating consumer entity. That's
Mm-hmm.
what you are.
Yeah,
For me, that's what you are in the United States. That's what you are. That's what you mean to them, to the system, to everything.
yeah.
That's what you represent.
You're a debt slave. Yeah.
Well, yeah, so you're a consumer. So you're there to consume the products that they put out, and you're a tax generating entity.
Mm-hmm.
That's your purpose in the system. Just identify and realize that, understand what you have to work with, how you're seen, rather than get caught up in the idealisms and doing the right thing. And none of that really matters. Not to the system, not to the machine.
Mm-hmm.
So just identify where you are, what you have. And so in a finite system like that, where everything is metricized, everything is short goals. Nothing is, again, your life. This is where work-life balance is. It can't happen. It can't happen. Now you can get closer, but you'll never, you won't necessarily, and even if you do obtain it, that's for a period of time. That's in a stage in your life that's circumstantially
Mm-hmm.
dependent. So that won't necessarily be forever either. Can you accomplish it? Yeah, for a period of time. But like what we've learned in some of our travels and being liberated from the hamster wheel for a period of time at least, everything gets old. Even paradise, even me and you were both. We should state that. I know we've said it in previous episodes. Me and you, we both had it good when we were. I mean, I didn't have to make these choices weren't so hard for me, right? I didn't have kids, I didn't have pets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was in a good place in I was, I didn't have a reason to get out, other than the calling and what was welling up inside. There was something within me but I didn't have something pushing on me. I didn't have it bad. I didn't have it bad at all. And I don't think you did either. Um, but that's just it. It's almost that you were able to obtain and get all these little shiny things and you know, the best hamster wheel and whatever, but that only satisfied you that one dopamine hit, and then that fades and that passes.
Yeah.
You always need more. We thrive better in struggle and with challenge, but not challenge that you have to, not forced challenge, not, again, pursuing a passion or pursuing something you desire to do, learn, take on, grow, stretch into, uh, not forced challenged in, again, being put into a position out of necessity that you don't belong in your organization simply because that's the only position in their hierarchical tree for you to go to next in order for you to afford insurance next year.
Yeah.
Different, not every, we say things, but we don't get into the nuances of it. There's a difference in change that you want and change that is being, forced upon you. So for whatever reason, back to that, understand that so understand the system you're in, understand the human body, understand neuroscience, understand what it is to be human. These are things that we are not taught. You're going to have to pursue these learnings yourself.
Yeah.
That's why I recommended some of the books that I did. They helped me. Maybe they will you, maybe not. You've got to understand this biosuit that we had no instruction manual for. You need to understand how much you do that you live your life that is not your consciousness. It is, you're aware of it, but it is not a conscious effort or action. And I'm not just talking about the autonomic system.
It's very true.
Again, your habits become your identity.
Yeah.
So your routines really are your identity, and you're not maybe even aware of that. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can invoke many more changes and actually become whatever you want to be. And that doesn't have to be, it's not for the rest of your life either. Don't, again, everything's in chapters and stages. Growth is messy. It's not a one-time thing. What you grow into now for the next 8-10 years will likely change again after that, and so on.
And
But
it has for us too.
but we don't see things that way. We don't talk about them that way.
Right.
You're a certain type of person and you're that way, and it's stagnant and it's for the rest of your life, and you were set in stone. And when the cast was die, when you were born, you're this way. Just not true.
Yeah.
There's so much we're not taught. And unfortunately, the things that we are taught keep us in place. They keep us rigid. They keep us from growing. They teach us fear in change. Again, unfortunately, that one's also just you are born that is neurological wiring that passed down from evolution. That's how we are still, but that's also reinforced by teachings, the structural systems, religion, you name it. Everything reinforces staying in place and rigidity. So it's having to understand and accept and see things very differently than maybe as you've understood them so far. Maybe in everything that's told you, again, it's counterproductive, unfortunately. What was the old saying? I think I referred to this in an earlier episode, but what was it? Life begins at 40. And I like that term, and my reason, now you can apply this to any age. It doesn't just have to begin at 40, but I do think it's a pretty good one as far as a number, because we spend the first 20 years of our lives being indoctrinated into something. And then once you're out and on your own, you spend the next 20, if you're lucky and conscious and actively working on it, you're going to spend the next 20 unlearning so much in order to get to the self.
Yeah, that actually rolls right into the next bullet point. It basically is change makes you feel like a child. Again, overcoming that fear. So you grow up, you learn these things, you get trapped in these boxes, and then suddenly you go back to the original innocence after you unlearn these things. So it was definitely a wake up call for me. It was a big difference. Just to the community and relationships here tend to be more valued than material wealth. Things like that are super important. We overlook those things. We forget those things. After our childhood years, we it's everything in our childhood. Our relationships with our parents and our brothers and sisters, maybe. It's your entire world, and then suddenly that all fades away. You go through your 20s and 30s, kind of building what you think is a good castle, and then suddenly you go backwards into it.
Acquiring assets. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And suddenly, when you're 40 on, you start realizing, wait a minute, this is not what life should be. And
Well,
you
there's
start
more to it. I mean, it is part of life, but
part
this
of
can't
it.
be it, right? It
It
can't
can't
be
be
finite.
everything. Yeah,
Okay, I'm here now. Now what? Okay, I've done all that.
it's just a small percentage.
Now what? You know, what is that little meme with the old guy on it? Well, I guess he'll die.
Right, right.
You know.
Right. That's why I think there's so much value in community relationships and experience. So like getting out of the U.S. and getting into a different culture, a different world. Something that here in Albania they do value family much more than the U.S. does. I mean,
Highly.
way more than the U.S. They've lost that maybe in the 50s and 40s and 60s.
Still had
And
it in rural America in the 70s, but by the 80s,
even it was kind of
that's when
going.
the nuclear family fell apart, right?
Yeah,
That's when the saying "go where the job is,"
yeah,
right?
and I
That's
think
when we started moving and becoming more nomadic and breaking up the family unions.
that was kind of the beginning of the end of the U.S. as far as like a cultural powerhouse. So losing that sense of helping your neighbors and everything
Communal
around you.
strength,
Yeah,
communal strength. Yeah.
the community and family are building blocks of society, and that's heavily eroded in the U.S. now, especially now. We were kind of the last generation to grow up in that. I think. Like I think now it's gotten to where every home is a broken home. Every it's gotten very
And
strained.
really, these are consequences of progress. You
Yeah.
know, it's as we progress, as with technology and a nation and industry,
Hmm.
it's the fallout of the system's growth and progress that results in these things. Again, like not having a job or working the same place for 20 years in the town you grew up in, and that evaporating. That's what made these changes. It's the fallout of progress, usually of industry, that
Hmm.
leads to your lifestyle choices.
Yeah. And they used to call that the American dream, and I don't think that dream exists anymore. So
So yeah, like to your point, so some of the difference of travel, and I'll stay specific to Europe. Um, yes, Albania in particular is very family, extremely family oriented. The old expression, "It takes a village," to
hmm
raise a kid,
hmm
and they actually still do that.
they do. Yeah.
They actually do that. The grandparents raise the kids more than not.
Hmm.
It's kind of the role they take on. They raise the kids more while mom and dad's out, doing their jobs. Um, but Europe as a whole, just period, is much more socially oriented than America. We go back to the same thing. I think we've hit on this probably every episode at some point. Who are you, or so who are you? And
Yeah.
as an American, you start in on your career and what you've done and where you traveled and
Hmm.
what you do as a job. Not what they're asking at all. And we don't have answers for that. We haven't explored that. It's almost scary too, because that would be against your coping mechanisms, because if you became very aware of that, it would be harder to stay in the system. And your
Hmm.
life situation at the time may be very dependent on you staying in the system and staying in the game. Again, we were fortunate, and this happened in periods of lives where it was pretty easy and comfortable for us to make these big decisions. Not everybody has that.
Right.
So just
Right.
recognizing that. Um, but Europe as a whole, very social, everything about it. Again, that all the places, your homes, everything's smaller, but you're expected to be outdoors. You're only supposed to be indoors for sleep, shower.
Yeah.
That might be about it. Everything
That's
else,
that's it.
dining, coffee, everything is outdoors, and it's in a social atmosphere.
Hmm.
Um, Not even indoors in that. Most of the time they're outdoor terraces and cafes, and
100%. Yeah.
you're sitting outdoors here. I wouldn't say nature because these are cities, but you still have some nature aspects depending on the city you're talking about.
Hmm.
But in a very heavily social setting, that's how they spend their time. Uh, Eating isn't eating. Like in America. You're not sitting down ordering your. It doesn't have to be in a hurry because you're not hurrying.
Right.
It's an experience. It's part of your day. It's part of your social day. It isn't something that you're getting it, throwing it down, and then moving on to the next thing.
No,
Uh,
it's an event.
Right, right,
Yeah.
and that's a daily thing. That's just
Yeah.
part of the way of life in Europe more as a whole. So that's even when I was traveling before long travel, so when I was just vacationing, when I was still in my career in America before my burnout, yeah, I saw and admired some of these cultural changes and was looking for them in America, and we have a couple of places in America that have some of these aspects, but they're the most expensive places in America. You got spots in California and spots in New York, and that's
Yeah,
about it, right? You
yeah,
don't even have a pedestrian, you can't have a pedestrian life, which is part of the rat race. So it's just a lot
yeah,
of what makes America what it is just the way, its industry, its design. So there's only so much you can invoke, so much you can change. uh, this is but travel can help you. And mind you, I am going back to the States probably. I don't know about permanently, but semi-permanently, probably for another 10 years here soon, and do some things and spend time with family,
hmm,
accomplish a couple of things I have in mind. So I am re-entering. I'm not anti, I'm not against. So we're just trying to explain what can lead to these feelings and these longings, why it's hard to accomplish feeling fulfilled or happy even when you've done everything that everyone said you were supposed to do and you have accomplished those things. Why do you still, what is this lack of, what is missing? What's the vacuum inside of you that the void that needs to be explored and filled?
that rolls right into the next 2 points, man. Because like we were talking about this the other day. When we travel, you meet a lot of broken people that are also seeking life validation, and we
Mhm.
refer to Albania as the island of misfit toys or purgatory for lost souls.
Well, I don't even use the word purgatory, because purgatory indicates between two different points.
Yeah,
And this is more of a waypoint. When you're lost, you're lost. This is just a waypoint.
yeah, that's
This
what
is
it
a
is.
layover, but it's not between necessarily two destinations. It's
Right.
just you're really lost.
I do find that I meet a lot of expats here that are definitely um, asking this. You're one of them, of course, but I mean, we when you talk to people, they're all at different levels of this certain journey. Like it's
What stage they are in
it
the
just
journey.
depends on what
Yeah.
stage they are, and I think Wes and I kind of we're on similar paths and similar ranges. Maybe he's even further than along than I am, or whatever. Um, but
That's why I want to share these books and stuff, because I've gotten back on my feet, and
100%.
I hope no one has to go through what I went through. But yeah, I just want to share what. I
100%.
mean,
Yeah,
it's been good. It is a journey. It's messy. It's not a score. It's not a good or a bad or a grade. But
I think just
um,
acknowledging these things, just saying, like the things we're talking about. That's the whole point of this channel. Really, is just we acknowledge that this happened, and this is what's going on, and this is the way I felt, and this is what happened. This is why I'm here, and I think just acknowledging that is a force unto itself. It puts things in perspective for you to think about things that you may have never thought about before, especially in the culture you grew up in the U.S. in particular. Now it's like, okay, we're thinking about these things, and why did I never understand this when in my 20s or 30s or but there's a reason for it. I mean,
none of this will come to you natively. None of this is taught. This is
it's
all going to be a journey of the self. You're going to have to apply effort in learning yourself. You're going to have to separate yourself from your ego, from your habits.
mm-hmm,
You're going to have to learn how to separate these two and identify yourself and what you really need. And then you're going to have, in many people's words, the courage to make those changes. Now, again, you know, life is life, and there are the responsibilities, and you need to be prepared for it. But maybe that's just it. Maybe it's preparing a plan to do these things. Maybe it's preparing a 5-year plan to set this aside, save this up, do this, do that, get this off my plate, free it up so that you can go explore for either a finite or an indefinite period of time.
mm-hmm,
Um, by the time I was here in Albania, I was still at a point where I said my compass was broken. People ask, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" I had no idea. My
yeah,
compass was broken. I didn't have a way north anymore. I was a leaf in the wind, but I allowed for that. The latter part of it, I didn't break my compass. It was broken, but the latter part, I allowed myself. I freed myself of. I spoke about this for all my routines, everything to just go where life took me and see what happened. Just allow that to happen instead of trying to structure it and control it, because
mm-hmm.
that was part of what I always did. So why would be doing the same thing beneficial? So I decided to do
Well,
things differently.
yeah, that's exactly the next point. So like people stay because in a job or a situation instead of challenging that complacency and overcoming that fear. So um, the complacency was basically the devil of the details. I think that's something you said the other day when we were talking. The complacency is the evilness. It's destroying you. You get rid of that complacency and do something different than you're doing rather than beating your head against the wall over and over again. You know.
Complacency is like what is it the saying? A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. I think that's
Hmm.
Mary Poppins, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Loved her. Yeah.
so complacency is a bit of that. Complacency is it can be very decadent. It can be very nice what is keeping you comfortable and happy and complacent and in your place, but it's really just a heavy layer of icing on top of apathy.
Yeah. It truly
Uh,
is. Yeah.
the core of it is bitter and hard, and it's just layered in sugary things to make it digest, to make you swallowable. I don't know about digestible, but to help you swallow it at least. Complacency can keep you stuck a long time. It did for me.
Yeah.
I'll just say that. I don't know about you, but it did for me.
Yeah, for sure. It's the anathema to change. I mean, like, and change is growth and breaking out of that shell. So it just completely destroys that motivation to force yourself. Usually, change is brought on by your
External force.
external force, and you're forced to, and it's a bad situation. Then it
And that's another
forces
reason
you to
why you'll always
change.
see change as bad, because the change you experience isn't
Is
initiated from the self.
so
So all the change that you've learned and remembered and traumatized by was due to external force. So you remember change as bad. So it just
absolutely.
reinforces more of the same.
But when you take control of change, or when you initiate the change, it's a whole different
Right.
aspect of it. So
Right.
you're taking control of your own life, I guess. And I mean, it goes into the last point,
Well,
basically.
that struggle to become conscious. I mean, that's something you'll never ever be done. It is struggle to be conscious from a minute to minute moment every day of your life. That is not something we do. That is not something we're taught.
Yeah,
This is something you have to pursue, learn how to do, and it's something you'll never entirely accomplish.
yeah.
It's a moment's passing when you're truly conscious.
That's the next point. Even you were saying this the other day, and I thought it was very insightful. Overcoming fear isn't something that's natural. It has to be learned and practiced. Practice is the key word there.
Yeah, it's a lifetime. It's not something you'll ever actually fully achieve.
Yeah.
But of course, your life will better and enrich, and you'll become a better, version of yourself, and have direction. You'll have control of the changes rather than being affected by the changes around you.
Hmm.
Um, that's what all these learnings are. Yeah.
Yeah, the metaphor was basically, think of skydiving. You have to jump, even though it's against every natural instinct to not jump out of a moving plane at 10,000 feet. But once you jump and the parachute catches you, you have a different perspective from way above, and it's a beautiful thing. It's an amazing thing. It was a risk, but it was definitely worth that change. So,
Again, at a human neurological wiring level, to understand something is to no longer be in fear of it. So this is where learning is just so critical.
absolutely.
It's again, it'll be continual. You'll never be finished. You'll never be done. But this is what removes fear,
Yeah.
is understanding it. This is why with traumas and therapy, so much of it is talking and talking aloud, even if it's an old subject matter, because the real goal there is for you to understand it.
Hmm.
And if you say it as, and maybe that's part of the problem is you're so used to saying something a certain way, you don't even realize that you're just, again, it's almost like a habit. You're just repeating the same thing, but you're still not seeing it. You're still not understanding it. And then one day, for whatever reason, you say it a different way, or another person responds to you when you say it, and they say it a little bit differently, and the light bulb goes on, and you're like, and now you understand it. In that very moment, once you understand it, it no longer has control over you,
Hmm.
right? It's no longer amalgamous. It's no longer this weird, amoeba, intangible, seeable thing. Now you see it crystal clear what it is. That moment you understand it, you're almost over it entirely. Maybe you still need to forgive yourself for something or someone else, or maybe there's another step after that. But you're largely over the hump at that moment of understanding. The trauma no longer dictates you. It doesn't necessarily go away. Will those feelings, thoughts, emotions, will those things still come up back up? Yeah, but they will not affect you the same way because you understand where this is coming from and why. And so it no longer, again, like externally, controls you. It no longer externally
Hmm.
affects you out of your control. As soon as you understand it, you're no longer afraid of it.
I think that answers the question that we set out to answer today: why does travel help with that? It's a change. It's a forced change that you put yourself into, that you're in control of, and I think it helps you with experience and knowledge. It helps you overcome those things, and you realize that change isn't a bad thing. It's just a necessary thing for you to grow. So that's
It's
kind
a
of
good thing, but we
it's a
don't see it
beautiful
that
thing.
way. We're not wired to see it that way.
Right.
This
You
is something you
you
have to
have
teach
you
yourself.
have to learn it and you have to practice it. So it's something that you strive for every day. And that seems like a pretty good stopping point for today, buddy. What do you think?
All right, man.
Man, I appreciate you. Make sure you guys like and subscribe down below, and I will see you on the next episode.
See you. Thanks.